Hello everyone and welcome to JB's Total Gaming, and today we're going to be talking about action RPGs. So what are action RPGs? Well, if you've ever played Diablo, that kind of deal where you kill stuff, level up, get more loot, get tougher, kill more stuff. And there's a lot of action RPGs out there right now if that's something you're interested in, and a lot of really good deals. So none of the games I'm going to be talking about here are $60 games. In fact, several of them are free to play. So I've already done a video on a few of these, but I'm still going to mention them just so that you know all of your options. And of course I'm not going to cover all action RPGs out there, but quite a few of them. The first I'm going to talk about are Marvel Heroes 2016, which I am playing right now, and Torchlight 2, and there's also the original Torchlight as well. The reason I'm going to talk about these first is these are kind of the easiest, if you will. That's not to say that they're super simple or whatever, but kind of the lowest barrier to entry. Marvel 2016, first of all, the one I'm playing right now, is a free-to-play game, so there is a low barrier to entry right there. And if you like the Marvel franchise, if you kind of like the cartoony style of graphics, and you like the relative ease of access, then this may be the game for you to at least try out, because, well, you can go to Steam right now and download it for free. Overall, the progression system is pretty simple. So if we go here, basically each character has 3 trees. There isn't necessarily a ton of variety as far as options for building each individual character, but there's definitely differences, and there are a ton of characters. And they did make a pretty good effort at trying to make the characters play differently, so I really do appreciate that. And overall, while this game may not have a ton of depth, but if you like the cartoony style, you like the Marvel Universe, it's a pretty good choice, and you can try it out for free. And Torchlight is also, if you're more interested in kind of the fantasy setting, Torchlight 2 is a $20 game on Steam right now. You can wait for a sale or whatever too, but it is also, there is definitely some complexity. I'm not going to say it's the easiest game in the world, but it is a game that you can get for a decent price. It also has kind of a cartoonier style for a game that is more of a Diablo clone as far as theme goes, where you're going into dungeons and stuff like that. So overall, these games, like I said, are, I think, super interesting if you're looking for something a little bit simpler, maybe if you haven't played an action RPG before, or you kind of like the simpler, more cartoony style, which is something I like. I don't consider that a bad thing at all. Basically, $20 for Torchlight 2 I think is a pretty nice deal for what is a decently lengthy game with a good amount of replayability, and obviously it's hard to beat free to play. Now, if you want to get more heroes in Marvel Heroes, you can do that. There are ways that you can get heroes through in-game currency. Not quite sure how long that takes. I haven't really played it long enough to know. And then there's also ways to get premium currency, to get a cheaper random hero, or to pick one of your own. That'll cost you about $10, which overall, the fact that you can play through the entire game with a hero for free, though, I don't think $10 to pick up a hero of your choice is a bad deal at all. So I'm not showing any actual footage of Torchlight, although I have played it. I don't have a current copy right now, but basically think dungeon crawler, a little bit cartoonier, and overall still a pretty solid game. So now we're going to look at the games that kind of you kind of think of as more similar. I'm also not going to show any footage of Diablo 3. I only have it on console, and I don't have the ability to record that at the moment. But basically, Diablo 3 is kind of the granddaddy, the one that everything else is based on. This idea where you kill stuff, you get loot, you level up, you kill more stuff. And you have your potions for health and mana, your potions to identify, and things like that. And what I'm going to be focusing on is how the other games differ from Diablo. And overall, this game has really quick, fast-paced combat. And I will say, as you level up and get more cool abilities, you can do some crazy, screen-filling stuff with guys in this game. And they have definitely focused on making each character unique. And that I really like, and I think is the strength of this. And Torchlight, I feel like, has kind of the dungeon crawl kind of for the family, I guess, where, there are still creepy monsters and stuff like that, but it just has an aesthetic and a feel that's a little bit more inviting than other dungeon crawls. And those, I feel like, are kind of the strengths of those. And let's move on to the kind of more direct competitors of Diablo, of Path of Exile, and the new released Grim Dawn. Alright, next up in the games we'll be looking at is Path of Exile. So this is another game like Marvel Heroes that I did a little video for if you want to see things more in depth. And this game is also free to play. And when I say free to play, I really do legitimately mean free to play. So when you play this game, you can have multiple heroes, you can do pretty much whatever you want, and it is all going to be free. Basically, the game has cosmetic upgrades and then maybe a couple little quality of life upgrades, I guess you'd call it, where you can expand the size of your stash and things like that. But you can legitimately play this game totally free and not really have to worry about anything at all. Basically, the business model seems to be that a lot of people really appreciate just how amazing the business model is, that they'll buy some cosmetic upgrades and things just to throw a few bucks the developers' way in appreciation. And I can totally see that working, because this game really is probably the best free-to-play model I have ever seen. Now, this game is a game that, again, plays more similarly to Diablo, and probably the game that, if you're really into complexity and depth, maybe your best choice. It's the game that's kind of diverges the most. One thing that I'll say that I think is a definite positive is the way the health and mana potions work. So a lot of games have things like that, and in this game you can upgrade them and whatever, but as you do, you basically use a portion of one when you take it and then refill it by killing enemies. So instead of having to have a bunch of potions around, you upgrade the ones you have when you get more of them, and then you use them, but you can't really just sit back either. In order to refill them, you have to kill enemies, so it allows you to kind of stay in there. If you're killing enemies, try to back off and kill a few and get back in. It's a really neat mechanism that I personally like, and that's one of the main differences, the way the potions work. Another big difference is, again, this game is a game that definitely lets you play whatever you want. You know, there are starting classes to pick from, but you can totally, you know, have fun with it, because your hero stats are going to kind of level up in a way that basically you can play anything you want, any style you want with any character, and there are definitely going to be some differences, but the main difference is where you're going to start on this tree. Yes, this is one of the most complicated things I've ever seen in any game. Basically, every time you level up, you're going to get 1 point to spend on this passive skill tree, and you can see this is kind of the path that I've taken with this character so far. Well, it's really ridiculously complicated, and this is a game you definitely probably want to do some research. Now, you could definitely just have fun and maybe screw up your first character, because this is a game you can definitely have a bad character build, because you want to figure out a path you take in this game, and this is really going to be one of the defining things, is where you go. And one of the things I'm going for is what's called a dual totem build. So I can summon these flame totems here, and I've been doing that throughout the game, but I eventually want to get to the point where I can summon 2 of them. So I've been taking a path that'll get me to here, because along the path there are bonuses, basically, you know, that increase things like, you know, basic, spell damage, health, intelligence, dexterity, that sort of stuff. Then there are bigger nodes along the way that give you, you know, bigger bonuses that you have to get to, like this Elementalist one is pretty nice for my build. But then there are also these kind of massive ones along the way that give you a positive and a negative, and this is one of the most interesting things about this game. So this will let me summon 2 totems, but basically I can't use any other attack spells. I can still do like traps and curses and things like that, but my totems will become my main way of attack. So then of course I'm going to want to do a build that basically focuses around building up my totems so that they do a ton of damage, and I also have ways of protecting myself, whether that be you know, things where I can warp around and stuff like that. So a lot of complexity with that. And also another huge difference with this game is the way skills work. You don't get skills the way you normally do when you level up. Basically, all of your skills come from these gems that you find. You get them for completing quests, and you can buy them at places that, you know, vendors, and then basically each one of these things is either going to be a skill, like a fireball or that firestorm, or something that buffs another skill. So these things will let you, some of the items in the game have these links where, for example, you could put an item into one place and then have a secondary gem that like buffs the skill that that's attached to, as long as the items are linked. So there's a huge amount of complexity between what passive skills you have, what gems you have, what gems upgrade you, and then, you know, items, and how you're going to link things together. And Also, on top of all that, when you sell items in this game, you don't just sell it for money. There's this kind of weird barter system where you get other items for selling items, but there are ways of like upgrading your existing items by doing certain combinations of things, or getting guaranteed certain special items by doing certain combinations of things, and that is not really explained well throughout the game. And yet another thing, you're probably going to want to do some research. They're called vendor recipes, and there's something that you're going to want to keep in mind if you get into this game. So while this game has a low barrier of entry in order to get into the game, because it's free and it really is a free-to-play model, there is a huge amount of complexity as far as combinations between your passive skills, your items, your gems, and then just the combinations of what sort of things you want to keep up. Oh, and how your skills level up is actually by using the gems, and then they will level up, not necessarily as you use them, just as you have them equipped. So you can level stuff up that you're not even using at the time, as long as you have it equipped to an item. So I just leveled up some of my gems there. And there are going to be times where you're not going to want to level up a gem past a certain point, because maybe you have a gem that is attached to an ability that makes that ability trigger when you take damage, but you don't want it to go over a certain amount, or you don't want it to go over skill to go over a certain mana cost or something like that. So I mean, there's all kinds of just crazy combinations. So if you're looking for depth and complexity, this is probably the game that I'd go with. Alright, last but not least, we're going to be taking a look at Grim Dawn. So this is a game that recently released. And one thing I want to say, I'm not sure about the multiplayer capabilities of Torchlight, if it has any. But obviously, Marvel Heroes 2016 is a bit like an MMO where you can play with other people. You can go into instances on yourself or team up. There's random people playing, and the same is true of Path of Exile. Now, Grim Dawn is a game that is somewhat designed to be able to play single player. Like, I can pause the game as long as I don't have anyone else in my party, which I really do appreciate. But you can also team up with other players, including LAN, which is a nice little option. So another thing, too, is Diablo and Path of Exile are games that have been out for a while and tend to do a thing that, you could call seasons or something, where they're, every so often going to add new content, and a lot of players who hadn't played the game in a while will come back and at least play for a while after the new season comes out. Now, this being a new game, I don't know if they're going to have that sort of support. But what does this game do well? Well, first of all, graphics. I will say, if you try out Path of Exile and you're unimpressed with the graphics initially, I do have to say, keep playing it. The first section is kind of the most boring and drab section of the game, and it's kind of a bummer that they start with that. But for a game that's been out for a while, and a free-to-play game, I do think the graphics are pretty fantastic. But if you want the best graphics, you do have the cartoony-style graphics of Torchlight 2 and Marvel. And then if you're into more this style of graphics, I would say this and Diablo both have fantastic graphics. I really do like the look and feel of this game. And you can see people with guns and stuff like that. This game is not a pure fantasy game. It's more of like a post-apocalyptic game. There is magic and things in the world, but there are guns and rifles and things like that. Now, when you start off with a character, you're going to pick your class, and there's not a huge ton of variety, but there is something interesting that it allows you to do. So, basically, your starting stats will be set, and then whenever you level up, you can level up either physique, cunning, or spirits. So basically, health, attack and defense, and kind of magic abilities are the simplest way to put it. So if I put some in the physique, I'll go up by a certain number of points, which is nice, and then basically get more health because this is kind of a tanky build. And there's all kinds of stats here, and you can have different weapon sets and whatever. So that's the first part of when you level up. You also get 3 skill points, and I haven't used any skill points in a while. I have 12 built up. I'm trying to decide what I want to do. So what's really interesting about this game, though, is you can dual class. Once you hit level 10, you can pick a second class and make a combination of the two. So I'm building a shaman who is kind of a tank. This is kind of his main attack now. I've pumped this up a lot. I do have a little AoE. I have a totem that heals me and deals damage, and then skills that basically help me stay alive. So what's kind of neat is these squares are skills you can activate. The circles are skills that buff that. You notice I only have a certain number of them unlocked because there's 2 things you can use skill points on. You can level up basically your stats associated with that character, and it levels up all 3 at a certain rate depending on what character you're using. And it also, as you move along this track, for each 5 you unlock a new section of skills. So since I've gotten to this line, basically everything from here back, I can put skill points in. So whenever I put skill points in, I have to balance between putting into my class and then to the actual skills I can activate and buff with characters. I really like this system. I think it's pretty neat. And then with dual classing, I haven't gone very far on the points in my soldier, but basically I want to get to these things that are going to help make me tankier, which is why I went with the soldier and shaman combination. But there's a lot of things you could do. I could do more of like a summoning class with this, and really that combination of combining two different classes and figuring out what skills and buffs you want from each one is pretty neat, and overall pretty simple, and I really like that about this game. Now, there's also another aspect to this as well, though, and that is devotion. So kind of the story of this game is there are these entities that are controlling humans, raising the dead, doing this stuff, and I think kind of trying to replace the old gods, basically. So whenever you restore shrines in the game, you basically unlock an ability to open up a star in one of these constellations. There's this thing called affinity, so whenever I get this one, I get one white affinity, and then whenever I complete a constellation like this one, this will give me 2 white and 3 blue. Well, I need that affinity to unlock higher level constellations. So this one right here takes 1 red, so I could get that red right here, and then if I complete the whole constellation, I'll get 3 purple and 3 green affinity. That's important because some of the later things, like this Kraken, needs 5 green and 5 blue affinity to be able to put points into, and so on and so forth. So there's a limited number of shrines in the game. So we see here we basically have 50 points we can unlock, and I have 7 right now. So up to this point, I have finished this constellation. This is kind of a neat thing, though, because some constellations, not all, a lot of them are just going to have certain, passive bonuses and things like that. So this is somewhat similar to the passive skill tree in Path of Exile. At first it seems a little bit less intimidating, but the idea that you need to balance these affinities and that to get to higher level ones does make it a little bit complicated. But I really like this ability too. So basically, once you unlock certain stars in a constellation, you do have to do them in a certain order, you have something you can assign to an ability. So this turtle shell, basically, I assign to one of my abilities that makes me tankier here, and it has a 100% chance once I get to a certain level of health in order to basically make me immune for a while, which is great. But a lot of these are going to have like proc chances. So this one I can attach to an attack ability. Now you can only attach one of these to each skill. You can't have more than one attached to a skill. But I could attach this to my main attack, so every time I attack I have a 25% chance of triggering this special attack, basically. And kind of balancing, which one of these you want, what skills you want to put them on, and what your long-term path is going to be is pretty interesting, and definitely the most complex part of the game. So overall, what do I think about Grim Dawn? I like the graphics. I like the world. This game has, I feel like, an interesting world, a little bit more interesting story than some of the other games. That could just be personal preference, but I do really like the feel of this game. I gotta figure out, okay, so we can just bash this down. Alright. And, there's not a ton of voice acting, just like most of these games. There's going to be voice acting moments, and then some things that are just text. And you're not going to have in any of these games the Blizzard cutscenes that you'll get in a game like Diablo, obviously. But I think this is a pretty neat world. I really like how you build your characters, and while the whole constellation thing is a little intimidating, overall everything else seems pretty smooth and still gives you a good amount of complexity available to you. So this game is $25. So again, basically at this point you have to figure out what it is that you're looking for. If you like kind of the Marvel world, then try out Marvel Heroes 2016. It's free. You may not end up liking it, but that's fine. If you kind of like the more friendly, inviting thing, check out Torchlight. If you've never played one of these games before, that might be a good place to start. If you haven't played Diablo, that's kind of the bog standard, not a bad place to start if you're willing to spend a little bit of money, though. You do have to keep that in mind. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, you see I'm taking damage here. Now, if I get away from combat briefly, my damage is going to refill as long as I don't take any hits. So, almost there. Come on. There we go. And you notice there's kind of like a red overlay on top of my health bar that went down when my health went back up. Another neat element to this game is this idea of endurance. So whenever you load up, you have full endurance, and then as you play the game, and you take damage and you get away from combat there's my turtle shell actually just triggered, so I'm basically immune to a lot of the damage for a brief period of time, which is really nice. go ahead and use a health potion here. We got this guy almost down. So, the idea that you can kind of stay in combat as long as you have endurance, you have to get away briefly in order to trigger it, but there's not as much of a reliance on health potions in this game as there are in some other games. Alright, now right here we have a situation where we came across somebody that wants to burn down their house and doesn't want his family to suffer any longer, so I can back away or I can try to intervene. So I can tell him you can't do this. Yeah, I'm going to say we can't lose hope. So I have no idea what's going to happen here, though. So there are definitely some things that affect the world based on what you do in the game. I don't know if I want this. So I can offer him to come back to... I don't know. I'll offer him to come back to where I'm at. So we shall see. Alright, so yeah, like I said, I can open a rift gate, and I don't know, this guy did seem a little bit crazy, so I don't know if that's the best thing. He might betray me, he might be helpful, I'm not sure, but I invited them back to our main camp. So, you know, there's kind of an idea of what can go on in the world, the choices that you can make, and, you know, obviously not knowing what the repercussions are going to be. And there are lots of bits of lore throughout the game like this that you can go in, and you don't have to, you know, you get experience bonuses for reading it, and you don't have to pay a lot of attention to it if you don't want, or if you can read if you want and get, you know, kind of a more in-depth feel for the missions and the lore of the world. Plenty of options if you're into an action RPG for either free or very affordable prices. It's a good time to get into action RPGs right now, and again, these aren't all the options available right now, but plenty of good things. So I highly recommend any of these games, again, depending on what it is you are looking for. Alright, I want to thank everybody for checking out the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, found it informative, and maybe found something that you would be interested in trying out. If you'd like to see a more in-depth look at Grim Dawn, let me know. I'd be more than willing to do that, as I haven't actually done a video on this one yet. And enjoy getting loot and getting tougher and getting more loot. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye!